Hello everybody, what is up? We got the RuneScape music in the background. This is the Heart Pirates TCG here, and oop, why does it say, it says RuneScape right here, that's funny. Let me go ahead and, no, how do I get that out? Let me do that, there we go. Okay, so we got the RuneScape music in the background here, and I asked a question to my Discord in which we got 43 responses for. Pretty good actually, but guys, if you haven't joined our Discord, you totally should. The link's going to be in the description below, but we got a ton of members on here. We have like, I think 500 now, which is a lot. But I asked, do we need a set rotation for One Piece TCG? And it looks like the majority said no at 69, nice, percent. And 30% said yes. So 13 people said yes. So that was the poll. And I went ahead and I watched an Eggman video. And, Eggman laid out a very good reason why some leaders should be banned, and I feel like I need to start making a more organized list on why I think other, whenever I make a video on, discussing anything, I think I need to make it more clear and concise. So that's what I decided to do today. What I decided to do today was make a pros and cons list of having rotations and a pros and cons list of having a ban list. So let's dive into this, right? So first we'll talk about rotations. The pros and cons of having a rotation goes like this, right? So the pros for rotations. Power creep is easier to manage. Okay? We'll go over all of them and then at once, and then we'll break it down. Number 2 is old cards and leaders don't become incredibly expensive. Number 3, alternate formats enabled for special tournaments and anniversary events. And Number 4 is old cards / leaders won't be useless due to power creep. Okay? So what I mean by number 1, power creep easier to manage. If you guys saw set 6 release, even a little bit of set 5, some of these leaders are really good, right? Sakazuki is just like 50 times better than Smoker ever was, right? Luffy is just 50 times better than Kaido ever was, right? Enel, I don't know how good Enel's going to be, but he seems to be pretty good. Those decks are very different from the decks that came out in set 1, right? Like Zoro obviously is still good, don't get me wrong. Law is obviously still good, don't get me wrong. But like when you look at decks like Odin and even Doflamingo and Luffy, Red Luffy, which I know is a starter deck, I know. It seems like those decks are just so much more versatile and they just do better things overall than any deck does in set 1 except for Law, I would say, probably, right? So as we keep getting new leaders, especially when we're not making like a consistent ban list and we're just like kind of letting things play out, kind of like what we're doing right now, they're going to keep making new decks and new leaders with cards that are just better than the ones we have now because they don't want Whitebeard to dominate for 5 formats in a row. So of course they're going to make a deck to try to beat Whitebeard, right? Which is kind of where red purple Luffy comes from, right? And then we have a new Law that comes out, and then obviously in set 6 we have Yamato, which looks to be absolutely insane. So yeah, that is going to continue to happen. I can only imagine what set 7 is going to look like if we keep going down this list of just really good leaders, and not just leaders, guys, but cards they're printing are just going to be really good. I mean, look at the new Borsalino. The Borsalino is pretty good. It's a 7-cost bottom deck of 4 or less, and then you have cards like God, I mean, I haven't really looked too much into set 5 and 6, but I mean, there's just really good cards. I know that, but I can't think of any specifically. But then we'll talk about number 2 is old cards and leaders don't become incredibly expensive, guys. Right now there is a shortage of alternate art, parallel art, leader laws. This guy right here, right? We see him going for like $300 on the marketplace. Mihawks are like $20 on the marketplace. The parallels are like $80 to $100. Film Gordon ulti from the film starter deck. It's gonna keep happening. As soon as there's a card that like works really well with a card that is in the meta in like future sets. We're gonna have cards that have literally not been around for like 8 months start trying to, like, people are gonna be like boosting the prices on them, and then there's very finite supply of those cards. So like they're going to be going for incredible amounts of money. I mean, obviously that's starting to happen now with Mihawks and Film Gordon and Ulti, like I said. So the more that this happens, like the longer that these leaders are out, they are going to be incredibly expensive later on whenever they're played in future decks, right? The older they are, the more they're going to be, you know? And for number 3, we have alternate art formats enabled for special tournaments and anniversary. If you guys pay attention to Yu-Gi-Oh, that's kind of my background. They have, you know, GOAT format, which is beloved by a lot of people. And then they have Edison format, which is like a very new kind of thing that people are kind of going towards. And it's just like classic Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Before it became super crazy, right? So when you enable these rotations, maybe, you know, after like 5 years, they do, okay, we're going to have a massive tournament for OPO1 format, right? Like a 10-year anniversary, let's do OPO1 format. So like just things along those lines, like anniversary events, like you have specific formats for that. That could happen. And I think that would be really cool for the game. You know, like you have new discussions, you have, you know, fun new tournaments, and that could be one of them. So I think that would be a pro. And then another pro is old leaders and cards won't be useless due to power creep. So this, I know, kind of counteracts what I was trying to say in set 2, but only a little bit, right? So old leaders and cards will, for the most part, be power creeped out of the game, right? You have like a 3/5 vanilla that will probably like be power creeped out of the game. You have cards like, you know, Bonnie, Jewelry Bonnie could potentially be power creeped out of the game. But then you'll have cards that will just always be good, right? Rush Luffy, you'll have Rush Zoro, you'll have like Rush Kaido, all of these characters that are just like solid. They'll see play for a while, but like 99% of the cards and leaders will just be power creeped out of the game. We even saw, is it Raiju, the blue and purple leader for set 6? She's kind of like a better version of Blurple Crocodile, guys. I hate to say it, but it's kind of true. So, you know, while not every card is going to be super expensive, the ones that are like very playable, if they don't get reprinted constantly, like they're going to be super hard to find. And then like, obviously those might, you know, be pretty good, but every other card in leader is just going to suck, you know, in like a year or two, like it's just they're going to suck. Like what is Blurple Croc going to do in 2 years? Like when people are just like, you know, doing all types of crazy stuff and, you know, summoning cards out of the deck and giving them, I mean, I guess Vivi kind of does that with Senamaru. But, you know, just stuff like that, you know, like there's going to be a lot of cards that just fall by the wayside. And, you know, that collection you have of, you know, of all cards from OPO1 to OPO4, you're going to be able to play 5 out of 2,000 of those cards. So that's a bad thing. Now we'll talk about the cons of the rotation since we talked about the pros. Old leaders cards become useless except for collections / alternate formats. Stores will have dead inventory for unsold product due to it being unplayable in competitive play. Kind of confusing for, you know, new or returning players for deck building, learning competitive play. I couldn't think of a fourth con. If you guys have a fourth con, let me know in the comments below. But let's talk about the con real quick. Old leaders and cards become useless except for collections, alt formats. Guys, with power creep, this actually might kind of be happening anyway. So literally your cards become useless that you can't play, right, in a rotation, except for collection purposes or alt formats, like I said. But figuratively, if there's no rotations, most of your cards become useless anyway because they're all going to suck for the most part, right? Because there's just better cards that become printed. So the argument that when you say that, you know, you don't want rotations because, you know, you want to play Whitebeard, like if you want to play competitively in 7 sets from now, you're not going to be playing Whitebeard because it's probably not going to be as good as the leaders that come out in the future. Also, when there's too many leaders to choose from, it's kind of bad for the game in a weird way because it's like you have all of these decks. Like right now I'm struggling. I'm playing like 7 different decks. Like I have Law and Katakuri and Vivi and Crocodile and all these decks built, and I can't keep up with them because I want to play all of them, but there's just too many to choose from, and that's just after 4 sets. I can't imagine after 15 sets, you know what I'm saying? Like all of these, like that's gonna be a nightmare trying to like have all these cards to play. Having to keep transfer the cards from different decks. Oh my god, it's gonna be a nightmare. And the third con, or I'm sorry, the second con is stores will have dead inventory for, you know, unsold product. Guys, this might not happen with Romance Dawn, for example, but Romance Dawn is always going to be classic because it's the first set ever. But, you know, Paramount War could very well, like if they did rotations, Paramount War would, like, probably never sell again, right? There's, like, no iconic cards from there except for, like, Manga Sabo, if you, like, you know, you want, like, a manga of the three brothers, you know, Luffy, because Luffy comes out as a manga in set 5, and then you have Ace and Sabo. So like that is probably the only way that that card would ever, like, that box would ever be bought. But the stores that have unsold product, they will likely never sell that again, and like they'll have to probably either sell it at a loss or like I think it's a tax thing. If you have too much inventory that you like don't sell, it like hurts you. Like hurts your taxes. I mean, I don't know a lot about business, but I think that's like something that I've heard before. And then third one we'll talk about is kind of confusing for new players or returning players to build decks. And I'm sorry for this video being a little bit longer, guys. It's going to be about 20 minutes probably, maybe a little bit longer, just because there's a lot to talk about in this discussion. But kind of confusing for new players to deck build, right? So like if you're coming into a game, like for me, what always turned me off for Pokemon, whenever I kept trying to revisit Pokemon or Hearthstone for that example, when they have rotations, is I would be like, okay, what sets, like the cards that I used to play with when I quit the game are no longer, like pretty much none of them are you're able to play, right? For Hearthstone, they go to like, I think it's called like the Wild or something like that, Wild format, and then One Piece or Pokemon, they just rotate out. And I was like, okay, you have to learn all these new cards, and then you're like, okay, but you know, in 1 month, cards from this set that I'm going to buy are going to be obsolete. So like, is this deck even worth picking up if next month this set gets rotated out and I can't use 8 of these cards from this set? You know, does that make sense? I hope I'm saying that right. But that's kind of my thought process. Or even worse, you know, it kind of acts as a barrier to entry because a lot of people will be like, okay, I'll just wait for the new rotation. So, you know, instead of playing it this month, I'll play it next month. And then what if they just forget? Like, oh yeah, I said I was going to play, but you know, maybe something else captivated my interest. Maybe like a new video game comes out, or maybe they finally make Halo Infinite good. I wouldn't bet on that, but yeah, that's, you know, what if there's other things come out? So yeah, and then it kind of like turns off new players from kind of entering the game. So those are the pros and cons for rotations. And then second page, let me move my camera. I'm sorry, guys. Let me move my camera to the left. Second page is the pros and con list of a ban list / restriction. Okay, so the pros for that, cards will always have some value or relevance because they are literally playable and legal. You can literally play them. All right, they could suck, but you can literally play them. All right. Another pro is formats that are stale and boring are able to be fixed quickly. Now this is for ban list / restrictions, right? And favorite leaders can be played forever in new ways. Again, guys, I couldn't think of a fourth pro for a ban list / restriction, you know, like an ongoing kind of cycle. But if you guys can think of one that I didn't say, let me know in the comments below. And again, we'll talk about the pros first in detail, and then we'll talk about the cons. So cards will always have some value / relevance, right? This is, like I said, the Film Gordon ulti, Film Nami, Katakuri is like $50 right now. Mihawk's like, you know, like I said, expensive. So cards will actually be pretty valuable if you've been playing the game for a while. So it's like kind of a good investment to like buy these boxes and hold on to these cards. If you're trying to at least like make some money off the game, you know, that'll always be good. Also cards will, you know, probably combo off with other cards in the future. So like, you know, if you have a 3/5 vanilla that's like a giant, right? Like it has that little giant tag, like a Straw Hat Crew, but it's a giant. And later on when they make like a giant leader, like, I don't know, like I forgot the dude's names from Little Garden, but those guys, if they become leaders, then, you know, everything with a giant tag is now able to be played. So you might have some synergy with that, and, you know, that way those cards weren't printed literally for nothing. So that's one of the pros, right? The second pro is formats that are stale and boring can easily be fixed. Like I said, guys, so for set 3, before the set even came out, Moby Dick was banned, right? Because that's when we got the Ezo Searcher. So with this in mind, if they do rotations, if they did rotations and not ban lists, Moby Dick would probably, like, Whitebeard would probably be like tier 0 for like 5 formats in a row before the rotation hits, right? Depending on how long they do the rotations for. You know, but with a ban list, they were able to fix the Kabaji problem with Nami and then Moby Dick before set 3 even came out. That way it wasn't like some unplayable, annoying format that no one wanted to play and it wouldn't sell product, right? People would be excited for the new format and not be like, oh, it's the same thing over and over again, which, I mean, kind of is happening right now with Whitebeard, except for we are seeing a lot of variety right now with Law and Whitebeard and Zoro and, you know, Kid, Film Dofi, Queen. Like, we're seeing a lot of like good decks, right? So it's a good variety you set 4. But, you know, one could say potentially that it's still going on to this day, even with the pros and cons of the ban list. But that is just food for thought. And then the third one is favorite leaders can always be played in new ways, right? So Blurple Croc, for example, in 6 sets, if you get like some super broken event, you know, you're like, oh, that might work good in Blurple Croc. And then you can like, hey, you know, fool around with it, do some tomfoolery and hooligan shenanigans and all of that jazz, right? That's kind of like that can be a thing, right? Again, I think it's kind of annoying because there's gonna be so many different decks and so many different cards that work with different decks. That's gonna be just like, it's gonna be like too much, man. It's gonna be like too much playtesting, and there's gonna just gonna be like too many leaders to play. I know that's like what is it called? An embarrassment of riches. It's a good problem to have, but like people are like gonna be kind of annoyed of like trying to like build so many different decks in person and like keep having to take them apart, and like put cards back together and like have like, you know, all these different sleeves and deck boxes. Like it's listed as a pro, but it could very well be listed as a con, just for the amount of like backlash that could come with, you know. It's like almost like an overwhelming factor, if that makes sense, right? And then we'll talk about the cons, right? There's 4 cons for this one. So for pros and cons of ban lists and / restrictions, we have power creep is uncontrollable, right? So if we don't have a ban list, if we don't have a ban list, right, then power creep, I think I messed this one up, right? Maybe not. I don't know. Let me finish this video and hopefully this makes sense. So if we don't have a ban list, or I'm sorry, if we don't have a rotation, then power creep becomes uncontrollable, right? We see this with Yamato. We see this with Raiju just being like better than Blurple Crocodile. We're gonna see this probably a lot more in the future. Even Enel has some like really good cards that are just like overall better than some yellow cards that were printed 2 sets ago. So that's something, right? And then second one we're gonna talk about is leaders / cards will be useless because of new cards will be better overall. Like I said, some of these points were kind of made before, but figuratively, so literally with ban lists, you are able to play the cards. But figuratively speaking, those cards are going to be unplayable because they're not going to be useful at all compared to newer cards that just are better and they do more. And that's okay, because obviously as the game grows, they're not going to be printing. They're not going to just have the same mechanics. They're not going to have the same level of power as, you know, previous sets, because, you know, the game gets more complex with more cards that are printed. That's understandable. You know, and with rotations, that's not a problem because they can just balance it for the next 5 sets. They can plan 5 sets ahead. But without rotations in with a ban list, they can't ever do that because like they just have to keep making cards that are just better than the previous sets, right? It's just what happens. Third con is old starter decks and boxes will be expensive due to playable cards, i.e. Film Gordon, Ulti, Mihawk. Like we said, I've said that before. That's just a con. We already see it with Sakazuki coming out next set. We see it with Queen, the blocker 5/6 Queen being, what is it, $24. We see it with Garp. Starter deck Garp is $10 right now. Shockwave I think is $10 right now, so like the Navy starter deck is like worth a good amount. The Film starter deck's worth a lot. Obviously the even though a lot of cards from the starter deck 1, the Straw Hat crew, got reprinted, some of those cards are still expensive. I think Guard Point's what, $8 a copy? Like, it's pretty expensive. Rush Luffy I think is $10 a copy. Dude, even freaking Restand Law. Restand Law is $10 right now. It's crazy. The common. All right, and then the fourth one we'll talk about is limits new cards potential. Now, I don't think I've talked about this one before, but I was actually talking with some friends of mine at our store championship a couple days ago, and my friend Sean made a really good point. Shout out to you, Sean, buddy. Good guy. Solid bloke. He said that cards, like when you look at, oh my God, let me pull it up. God, dude, there's and I'm not going to do a lot of editing for this video, but I'll try to talk about it while I'm pulling it up. But there's a card coming out, and I believe it's set 6, and we don't have set 6 on the OnePiece.dev yet. But it's like if your leader is multicolored on play, I think it's Uta. I think it's an Uta or an ulti. And if it's like if your leader is multicolored, draw 3, trash 2, or something like that. Or draw 3 and put 3 at the bottom. It's an on-play effect for blue. And my friend was telling me that its effect is if your leader is multicolored, use this effect because they can't ever make Nami have that accessible for its arsenal, right? So cards like Crocodile, Doflamingo, Vivi, like they would love a card like that. Well, actually Vivi could use that. But what are some other blue leaders, just like solid blue leaders? I don't think there's a lot. Huh. There's not a lot now that I think about it. Crocodile, Doflamingo. I think that's it. Right? What's in set 4? Yeah, I think that's it. I think those are the only 2 right now. God, I don't want to sound stupid, guys, but it's late. It's like almost 1 in the morning here. But yeah, so if your leader is multicolored, that's the only way you can use it, right? So like decks like Nami could not have access to that, right? And because of decks like Nami existing, every time they consider printing new cards in the future, they have to look back at like 5 sets before the set comes out and be like, okay, will this card make this like completely broken? Will Nami abuse this? Would Whitebeard abuse this? Would Crocodile abuse this? And they have to keep making cards that like aren't completely broken for any single leader, rather than them just like, okay, we don't have to worry about this being broken for Crocodile anymore because that was the last rotation. We can make a new, like, great deck that doesn't become completely broken because other cards exist in combination with it. Does that make sense, guys? And so with a ban list, it limits new cards' potential to just be very interesting for other decks in the future, down the line, as soon as sets print. But that's it, guys. That's it. I'm hoping that this kind of explains my thought process behind it, why I think it's a good idea, and let me know what y'all's thoughts are in the comments below, and I will see you guys on my next video. Peace.